So what we have here is me copy pasting what Ricardo did, kind of the latest in Figma, and putting it in FigJam. And we went through kind of all the screens and estimated which things we can cut so that we can save time and be able to deliver on all the other stuff. So the clock means it'll be handled later at a later time. I don't think these are the latest. So Ricardo is going to show some screens that look very similar to this in Figma. So I don't think we should talk about the UX of it right now, but we should just talk about features and deliverables. So let's just go screen by screen, I think. And we decided to, we're going to have the left-hand bar, but without the counters for how many chats are in each collection. But we will have like the structure of collections inside collections. We don't have a proper search yet that can search for everything in Storytel, and that's quite a big engineering challenge for us that we'll have to tackle at some point. But for now, we just won't have it. We can list the recent chats as a recommendation for users to get into it, and they can, of course, upload stuff. We didn't touch dynamic chats, but that's not going to happen either. That's a separate feature that we'll work on at some point. This is the view for a collection. So this is what you see when you get into a existing collection that has chats in it and files. Again, no search, no counters for chats or files, and no insights tab because we don't have the concept of insights yet in our system. We'll show recent chats and we will let you sort through all the chats you have and scroll through them and see them all. Again, no counters for the number of files. Does someone want to say something? Okay, I thought I heard something. The chat view will look very much the same as it looks today. The premium answer is a separate feature, which we will do at some point. It's around using a one preview that does more thoughtful answering. And there's no retry button. We will, however, have this new share button, which has some new implications with permissions in phase one, where when you want to link to a message, you also have to make sure the person you're sending the link to will have access to the thread itself. And the world knowledge toggle is also a separate feature that we can work on independently. It's not part of the collections and permissions effort. This is an alternative view for a chat, which we decided not to prioritize because we already have a workable chat view. We don't have any designs for the files tab right now. So these are, I'm just gonna skip over them.
The thought at this time though is that it would basically be like the chat view that we had.
Like this, yes, exactly, but a table of files, essentially.
Andy, I just want to understand one thing about the clock. What I heard you say earlier was that that means it's coming later.
Yeah.
But I think the way you're using it now is Ricardo is going to do those designs later, but it's still going to be coming in like phase zero. Is that true?
Yeah, this one is actually, I don't think we should have
right.
put the clock there. So that's correct. Yeah. I think what should have happened was this, just for us talking about it. Yep. Thank you, Giorgio. So this is a focus just on the left sidebar where you go into the recent activity rather than the collections view, and you'd see a time-based sorting of just smart chats. This design has collections too in here. We need to talk about that and think it through if we want to do that at some point, but essentially we're just going to have smart chats sorted by latest in here. And the view in here will be the same as when you open a smart chat from the collections view. So the right panel doesn't change. It's just how you navigate through on the left side. we're not going to support all these profile things. Right now, we don't have like people, billing, upgrade, FAQs. We will have like a sign out button, and it will look very similar to what we have today. And importantly for collections, you'll be able to create collections. You'll be able to rename them, not duplicate them. We won't support that for now. You can invite people to collections after phase 1. You can manage the permissions for that collection. You can start a collection. And we won't have any type of version history supported. And you can, of course, delete collections. And the same actions can be done from the context menu on the side for a collection. It's just the same context menu as here. I'm guessing no feedback or questions. This is the design for new collections. I'm gonna let Ricardo talk more about the UX of it, but we will let you create a new collection and give it a name. These are some onboarding buttons that we could have like for uploading documents when you create a collections. We're not gonna support that, or will not commit to that for the production release. And we will also not commit to having descriptions on collections yet. But essentially going through this flow would create a new collection. We've seen this screen. Okay. And now that was pretty much mostly phase 0 stuff, collections. Now we're getting into phase 1 territory, which is permissions based. So you'll be able to invite people to a collection, and you'll be able to search people from your org and add them to a collection, choose their role. You'll also be able to add external users by their email. I'll let Ricardo talk about the UX of it and how you can choose who is what. But we are committing to being able to do that.
Yeah, just
And
to add, the only thing that we
Yeah.
see there that we're not committing to is just the concept of teams. Again, that's always been a
Thanks
phase
for that.
2.
So the designs show teams, but it's actually will just be people to start with. I think there's some other designs that show, so it will look more like a person like here.
Is in terms of roles, like we were just looking at something that said admin. I'm guessing that wouldn't be a part of the initial release. But just it's not because it's really important to me with the release. It's just as y'all are doing a lot of expectation setting here. So just to make sure I'm following.
Yeah, the roles would be included, that you could be like
Right.
an admin or a collaborator or a viewer. I think that's the simplest way to say it.
Yeah.
I think those are the built-in ones.
And how is admin different than collaborator?
An admin could do something like delete, like delete a collection.
Okay.
A collaborator could add files to it and for threads or chats, things like that, share it. But a viewer couldn't share it.
Sorry. I don't think collaborators would be able to remove other people from a thread either, or from a collection. Yeah.
But
There's also
and a
You could
collaborator add people to a thread.
Yeah, you can
Does
invite.
not remove. So additive, not destructive. Okay.
Yeah, and we'll two things. One, if it feels wrong when we get it out, that's an easy thing to change because the actions are all very granular. And two, so those are the types, like, does it work feedback that we're looking for when we get to stage. And then the second thing I would add is that in the future, the customer will have the ability to create their own custom roles. And so a paying customer like Paramount, if they wanted a collaborator to also be able to remove people, they can do that. But that's not in this first phase. And lastly, I'll say we'll help with documentation for all of this. It'll all be generated from the system. So what
Amazing.
you can and can't do will just be automatic.
As part of permissions and adding people to a collection or a thread, you can also generate links that enable access to those things. And you can choose the permissions for the link.
Nice.
One thing that's a little bit missing from here, but it's represented here with a quick mockup, is external users who are invited by email and they're not part of like the org. They will get an invite on their email. So then that will be reflected in the system as a pending invite in some way. And then the admin will have permission to revoke that invite.
Nice.
And by default, we're gonna have them expire in 7 days. Later on, it can be like an org setting that an org can configure, like if they want them to expire in 30 days, for example. This is all still permissions, adding people. And there's also the concept of transfer ownership, which we didn't really talk about, Aaron. I think we didn't get to this screen.
Yeah, let's put a clock on it. That can be
Yeah.
a fast follow.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So this would be if an admin wants to transfer the ownership of a collection to someone else, for example.
Mm.
And these are just are you sure screens. Okay.
Mhm.
That's all of it.
I've got a couple things, and maybe Ricardo, why don't you share what you've got, and then I'll just share a couple of questions and thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. Let me share my screen so I can walk you guys through some of the thinking behind some of the stuff in here. So basically, we are building collections and permissions, but there's a couple of concepts that we needed actually to tackle in order to having all of this stuff together here. So one of those is, what's the interaction model? And when I'm speaking about the interaction model, is how is the way that these patterns or these panels here are going to behave in each one of the moments. So essentially, why I was thinking around like Storytell landing page, because when a user is onboarded, even if this is just a first time user or an already advanced user, for saying it that way, even if that's an admin or it's just a like a viewer, we need to make sure that we have like in a space, if that is possible, like in a space that you can be landed. So that's the aim of this first column here. This has actually not been chat with Flav, or the structure of this is just the thinking that could be behind this, like maybe considering to using the navigation or the search bar as a tool for us to start into looking for things that we already have in a very advanced level of the experience. So that was the thinking behind using this, but I understand like the implications that using a search bar can have, because it needs to be a lot of backend work in order to just attach this to the logic of the panel one. So I think that's the first thing on this. It's not pretty related to the tickets that we built for actually that you guys rated for the Gen 2, but in some sort of way, it's something that can trigger some ideas for us to start thinking around, like the fact that the people can just tap over the Storytell logo and they go straightly there, or there's something more in here that help us to navigate through that thing. So that's food for thoughts for now. It's not the aim to maybe get into deeper in that, but it's also interesting to see some of the concepts that actually some users, as Steven has told, about having sliders or having something like can really help me to navigate and understanding the experience in a way that is not totally open to me, that I can go in different directions, but it's something that is kind of guiding me and during my journey to kind of having a sense of that. And probably one more project that is going to help a lot of that is the onboarding project, that I think is relevant to add. And there's something that we can do as well, like having some sort of walkthrough or elements that can explain me as a first-time user what exactly I need to do here and what is everything that I'm looking for. That's quite important to have. This is not actually here just yet because it needs like a story. It needs like let's say Fulano is doing something, he needs to do this, and the way to solving this specific pattern will be doing this and this and this, and this is the outcome of that. So that's the story that we need to start to build in. That was the user stories that I was speaking the other day. And here is pretty much like the fact, like trying to push in or thinking around that dynamic smart chats that could be embedded in some sort of way that is a dashboard. All of the systems or everywhere that you go, you're gonna see that you got like this very first screen that is your welcome screen where you have access or control over your own stuff. So this is a cool place, or at least a philosophical concept that we can take in consideration for the future, not right now, for exposing to the user certain stuff that is going to be pretty helpful for him and actually, make the difference for the user to becoming a hero. So that's part of this positioning here, pretty alternative. My apologies for just starting to mixing up things, but I think in the analogy that I put in this is I'm just trying to fishing with dynamite, like trying to covering all of the different scenarios that we might have to solve in the future if that is not something that we need to face right now. So, okay, moving on to the collections and in the way that the panel is working here is basically on some of the thoughts from Flav that maybe we can use instead of the chats in the collections as a separate items. Maybe the way for us to navigate this could be actually the collections, because this is a place that your threads and all of your information and your knowledge is going to be. So here, that was a kind of a nice request, like having your recent chats, or could be something that recent collections as well. I mean, the concept is could be escalated for that, but for now and for this first iteration, I think it's important to maybe having it that way. And I think it's clever to having the chats, files, and insights tabs, because it's a way to separate concepts, but at the same time, it's something that is exposing the information for me. So when I just first landed here, I'm not gonna see anything selected here. I'm just gonna see my actual homepage. And then if we feel like, like just landing in a space where it's already like a collection is too straight to the point, maybe we can just do that improvement in the future. That's the thinking behind that. So, well, we are selecting here, and then we have like our breadcrumb on the top. And it's very important to thinking how is the way that this panel one behaves on the relationship with panel number two, because in the same way this is going to be our panel of we're going to control the experience through here. We're going to have all of the context of stuff that we've seen, but at any time we can just jump into ideation, delivery, promotions, marketing, or something else, and we still can see the stuff that is happening at the number two. This is a pretty common pattern in UX, and it's a pattern that many products and players have done. It's like it's just fine if we can have it. For that's the reason why we do think that having like these two different expressions for that menu will be important. And actually having these two entry points is important for the user, not having like a struggle of where I need to look at to setting the things up, or changing my rename my collection, or doing something else, duplicate collection, invite collection, manage permissions, or start. I probably most of the main text that the user are gonna need, and the most important of them that will be like sharing, or like stirring the or fabricating the collection is something that could be exposed as well in two different areas, and that's fine. Our aim is to help the user to engage in doing the things work, and maybe that's a good way to have for certain actions like that. So I'm gonna stop there. Please let me know if there is any questions around the discussed stuff. If not, I can just move forward and display more of these screens.
Ricardo, I had one question. I know it's like very much future state, but what does modified mean in this case?
Yeah. That's basically the show version story. In some sort of way. Maybe we can navigate through this is a pretty initial concept actually used for Google Drive. So I was thinking like, okay, how we can look for the things. Sometimes the user get into a place and he don't actually remember. And sometimes that happened to me when I'm looking into just single notes, thinking, how is the name that I put to that note? I was like, okay, finance, that was investment, or that was what? So maybe looking for a word specifically, or helping actually in doing this search bar something more robust in the future that is quite hard to do that right now, is maybe you're having this filter system, and maybe this could be just drop downs or sliders, as Steven mentioned on the call. Could be something that you can just select, and having the results related to that thing is like a filter, in an exposed filter basically. Or if not, you can just simply have like who was the person that actually built that collection, or who was the individual that actually just built the chat or starting that thread. So maybe that would be something like, okay, chats, people, or modified by date. I don't remember what exactly that happened, but I think that was in September the last year, when someone called out something about specifically, I don't know, LLMs or whatever, and that's the way to just get there, or by name collection or something like that. So these definitely need more definition and more a requirement behind, if that's something that we need to work on. But it's just like the very first side of how can something like that could work, if that makes sense. All right, so yeah, so this is screens. Okay, let me jump back here. So, well, we have our control over the research collection here. We already seen like some of these things can happen here. We can share, we can tap over some of the users here and see the permissions as well. It's not just necessarily to get through the menu, I guess. When we go down and we have the chat view, it's just within the breadcrumb. It's pretty important to have the breadcrumbs so the user understand that he's actually just navigating through that. Despite is that was just created, a collection that was just created, a thread that was just created or something, but it's quite important to having the concept of a breadcrumb. This could be also iterated, but I love the way that Dropbox that work with that specific kind of a thing, because you can see the root and we can have like a large root of that breadcrumb on the top. If this is a super crazy user that has like 20 or I don't know, many collections behind that, we can see that actually we can have and truncate the copy in a proper way. So most of this thinking is an escalation idea that we can just work on iterate in the future. So just to call out, maybe the chat, I haven't thinking too much about the elements in here. Probably share is already redundant because we already have this on the top. Maybe get premium answer, and some of these patterns in here could be better. We haven't worked on that yet. We are just focusing and trying to solve in the pieces of the panel 1, panel 2, and some of the information that we need for permissions. This is something that we need to revisit as well. The thing about the words knowledge, it's a separate project. We are going to work, and probably settings here is going to be pretty much like here on the top, just having that parallel thinking that happening in collection that should be happening in chats. So food for thoughts again. This is just an experiment. Flav mentioned that would be interesting for us to having the access to the specific items, or yeah, to the assets through actually this list here. I'm not quite convinced about having a drawer once we already have navigate through panel 1, panel 2, and panel 3. So I was just putting this just for the sake of having the, like the study there. Maybe more to come is like definitely using the Slack behavior, which are 3 panels that can flexible move in some sort of responsive way, and where we can actually navigate through of this. Again, there's some sort of concepts like these cards that are overlapping in here and the slider here on the top that doesn't necessarily make too much sense when you have a drawer here. So I will definitely stick to this one. I don't know how much value is that when the user has a chat in here and need to drag and drop into the other chats. I think that's a solution that we already started to work around. That was maybe not here, but it was the change in BU. I don't remember if maybe let me take a look at if I have it here. I think I did something with that. Okay, I don't got it here. I know where it is. Okay, yeah, there it is. So we had like these 2 different views, like just a weight in the collection. This is just a previous idea, or having like this kind of a toggle here for just visualization of the collection. That at some point could be interesting, like having just the the option of having like a dashboard view where you can see tiles, or the other one. I'm not speaking about the story tiles, okay? Just the tiles that were like the cards, or here when we move to the other toggle that is actually a list. So that concept could be live in it could be pretty useful in moments when user has a lot of stuff in there, and that's why we ended up like coming to this idea. So okay, moving on. These two states in here, they're probably are gonna work pretty much as Flav just laid them out. This is pretty much like an internal page that has information there. We are gonna pretty use like the pattern of Dropbox that you can see that when you select in a specific things, like when you have a file tab, you go to the file, you can see the internal file, and then you actually interact with that. But this is essentially what Andy said. It's just a list. Maybe we can figure it out how's the way the iconography or something would be different, because we are going to have and support different type of files. So that's going to happen here as well. It's pretty much similar to this. Then the internal, this is file tab, but it's wrong. It's internal. Or insights. Oops. Insights tab is the way that we can actually work out with that dashboard idea that pretty connects the dots with this, which is dynamic smart chats that are within the collection. Maybe we don't have to get them totally exposed, but this is pretty much something that we need to discuss. You know, how is the way that this smart chat can come here? I don't want to say that this is the best way to express that, because it has a lot of implications in the user experience and also in the responsiveness of that tiles. But definitely could be like this is essentially just a card that can get you to that specific thread that I think is totally valuable. And then you can see some other information about that thread. Maybe that can happen in here in the Insights tab with maybe.
Hey, Ricardo, that's become this insights is going to become a very big thing for us if we think about Storytel as a collaborative intelligence platform for unstructured data. This is where things start to get really valuable from a business insights perspective, business intelligence. But the MVP for this can just be at whatever level of the collection I'm in. Those are the dynamic smart chats that I'm seeing. And so as I go up to broader and broader collections, I see more and more of the dynamic smart chats. Like it can follow the structure of the collections. It's fine if that's the MVP, and then we can go from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, there's one thing beyond that. I'm concerned, like when you get in a collection, you can see your recent chats or maybe other stuff in here, but it feels like it's more how can I say that, like predominant to see your actual stuff in there rather than see the, you know, like the idea that you had actually including them into the first kind of a side of that collection. I think that was useful, but at the same time that was getting pretty busy in the sense that maybe the user is going to get there and say, oh, what I need to do here, you know, what is this actually a list? This is actually tiles that I can access. These are actually shortcuts or what it is. So I think we can definitely think about that maybe in a different way. But that's exactly the reason why I came in with some of thinking like this. Maybe at some point the Insights tab could be just included as a dashboard. And the dashboard is the main area that you actually solve everything. It could be something, an item here or not, but it's essentially your landing point, which I think is pretty important to think for the future. But that's great to understand. Okay, so moving on to the recent activity. This one has not been pretty tied up in the sense that I just included collections and chats, and there are definitely some concepts that I'm colliding here and that are going to be confusing if we look at the perspective from the user, because you're going to have like mostly the same stuff, and the recent activity shouldn't be at that point something that you really need to have as a tab. You know what I mean? Because the way that we had in the past, there were chats and collections, and maybe these are two assets or two type of things that you can actually navigate through them. But in this case, we need to actually work more on this. I know Flav was working in something specific about that. We need to connect to see how we can just solve this part, but do not pay too much attention on what's going on in here right now. I would say that this is going to change definitely based on some of these insights that he just pulled and some of the discussion we had. So this is going to be work in a better way. Good. So starting here, so profile drop down, we already seems what's going on in here is basically the way that user just kind of administrate or doing certain type of stuff. So the aim here is not necessarily putting features that I think should be right now. It's just essentially, okay, I'm gonna just take some examples from other players or some other people that has, you know, certain kind of a settings, people, billing update or whatever it is. But the important thing about this thinking or this philosophy about the drop down is that we have this entire list of things that we can add or we can take out. If this is a user that is just a first-time user, probably not gonna have like that amount of things. It probably is a advanced user gonna have a bunch of them or something like that. So if we feel that we need something like to explore or to showing up what is actually this user in my organization, we can just leverage like some sort of doorway to saying, oh, okay, this guy is just working in some sort of the teams in the organization, and maybe he has been collaborating in this collection. So this is pretty rough. This is not at all something final, but I was just thought that it would be interesting to have in that view if you tap from here. And also the organizational thing, we haven't think too much about that. And as you noticed, I just moved that from here on the left bottom to the top, because here is getting probably very busy, and at some point we are gonna need that area for solving a lot of different problems, like the truncation of this tree, the hierarchy and this tree, and the taxonomy for the specific collection. So that's the reason why I pull this up to the corner. Good. Here pretty much about the concept about what we were talking about the panel. So essentially you can just do the same exact tasks in both of them, but the thing is you're already in the collection here and you don't need to concern about this. But if you want to navigate or do something else in maybe other collection here, the way that this behaves is, especially, I mean, in the best of the worlds, is like this is an overstate. This is a rollover. You go to put your mouse over that, and this is gonna expose the menu. And you are, you have the ability as a user to either click that or not, or just seeing the other stuff. But you can actually interact with other stuff. It's like happening in an email or somewhere else. There you can actually just see, even if I'm in the research collection right now, I can just have the ability to doing stuff for other tabs in a different pattern. Once I tap over this one specific, or not in the menu at all, but I have the access to the menu, I can see the context of that one. If I tap over research of the icon or maybe the other stuff in here, we are going to be actually in that context, and we are going to see what's going on in that actual collection. In terms of building the collection, this is a pretty rough thinking that we had from some of the conversation with Aaron and Grim and Andy, that maybe would be interesting to have it like a different concept of this, like pretty like Notion does. Again, this is a pretty first side of that. Why having this in a way that is an overlay? It's important because we can just separate the action from what the user really needs to do. He understands that creating a new collections is a predominant action. It's not just like renaming or doing a secondary action. So that is quite important for him. So create collection is the first item in the list. Just to start over here, we can definitely edit the type of amount of stuff we need to put here. We can actually add, or I had before in one of the studies, like adding users from here, but it's something that is gonna happen in the order of guiding the user through experience. Maybe we don't have to get this stuff in here for not being confusing, because let's just take the edge case scenario where the user just step, instead of starting to type in the name or title of the collection, he just start to drop in documents and he forgot about putting a name to a collection. So that type of things and that type of nuances that can happen. But at least for us right now, maybe that could be something like that. Maybe it's not necessary to having a description, but sometimes it does. You have like a descriptional kind of a third panel that shows you what is that about. The user that just has been onboarded, he doesn't understand what it is. It's just someone sent me an email. I get to Storytell. I get all of my process to be on the walkthrough. And when I get to the collection, I'm not actually sure what is this about. We don't have the meeting. So I need to think about that user in the perspective of how is his learning curve to get into experience. So sometimes we need to be pretty specific about descriptions and stuff like that. Okay, so predominant actions, what I'm calling in that way is like, let's say that predominant are main actions that the user need to solve in order to get through the experience, and one of those is actually a new collection, in the sense of he needs to understand that creating a new collection, it's something more important than just rename something, than just navigating through the menu or doing something else. So these type of actions really need to be bold, in the sense that the visual cue of that really drives the user to understand that he needs to do something else, that the cognitive effort of that person delivering or doing that task is gonna take more, because he needs to write up stuff, he needs to write a description or doing something else. But that's pretty much what I'm trying to say. And the secondary action, there's stuff the user understand already, have seen in other experiences, and he knows how they work. In the example of that, it's just tapping over the, the icon here and having access to the drop down. That's pretty much what is a secondary action in that sense. So yeah, I'm gonna stop there just to continue with the agenda, but that's pretty much the thinking behind the work.